They all went off, every single one. In the blink of a mushroom-shaped eye, humanity pressed its collective big red button and turned Earth into a DIY space heater with bonus radiation. Welcome back to What If Horizons, the podcast where we explore wild hypotheticals, absurd futures, and all the dystopias your therapist warned you about. Today's cheerful topic: what if all the world's nuclear weapons detonated at once? Spoiler, it's not great. Let's begin with the numbers, because numbers are comforting when everything else is incinerating. As of now, Earth boasts approximately 13,000 nuclear warheads. That's 13,000 separate ways to obliterate polite conversation. But in this little speculative vacation we're taking today, we're not talking about gradual escalation, rogue generals, or someone tripping on a shoelace in a missile silo. No, we're imagining a synchronized cosmic blunder where every warhead, strategic, tactical, retired, or just forgotten in some Cold War museum, goes kaboom simultaneously. So where are all these glorious firecrackers? Mostly the usual suspects: the United States, Russia, China, France, the UK, and a few other club members who think mutually assured destruction is an exclusive party. If detonated simultaneously, these devices would release a combined energy of around 7,000 megatons. For context, the bomb dropped on Hiroshima was about 15 kilotons. In other words, we're talking about over 466,000 Hiroshimas. A number so large it should come with its own psychological support hotline. The explosions would hit strategic points, military bases, major cities, and likely a few unlucky cows grazing too close to a retired silo in North Dakota. The initial blasts alone would vaporize millions in an instant. That's not poetic exaggeration. Vaporize. Gone. Poof. No time for dramatic farewells or even petty last-minute tweets. Cities would become glowing scars, visible from orbit, each with its own oversized vanity mushroom cloud. Coastal areas would boil. Mountain ranges would buckle under shockwaves. And the sky? Oh, the sky would turn into a canvas of wrath. Dust, ash, and radioactive debris would rise into the stratosphere, blotting out the sun faster than a Twitter outrage cycle. Within hours, Earth's atmosphere would become a grim soup of irradiated soot and cosmic regret. But wait, there's more. Ever heard of nuclear winter? Imagine the worst winter you've experienced, multiply it by all of them, remove the holidays, and toss in the complete annihilation of agriculture. Crops would fail, temperatures would plummet by up to 10 degrees Celsius globally, and anyone who thought climate change was a hoax would be too frozen to gloat. The survivors, yes, there would be some, would inherit a world lit not by sunlight, but by the eerie glow of decaying isotopes. Underground bunkers would become the new suburbs. Forget the white picket fence. Your new dream home has a Geiger counter and canned beans for the next 30 years. Communication systems? Toast. Governments? Mostly charcoal with Wi-Fi issues. And Starbucks? Tragically vaporized. Still, humanity has proven its tenacity. If cockroaches could talk, they'd say, "These humans are nuts, but boy can they cling to life." In pockets of the world, people would scrape together what remains: technology, memories, sarcasm, and begin the slow, awkward crawl toward rebuilding. But make no mistake, this wouldn't be Civilization 2.0. It would be Civilization Ash Edition. Of course, that's just the physical world. What about the psychological toll? The trauma, the loss, the endless loop of "I told you so" from that one conspiracy uncle who's now king of a basement kingdom somewhere in Utah? That's the legacy we'd carry. Not just ruins, but regrets. The knowledge that humanity had everything: art, science, TikTok dances, and chose kaboom instead. But we're just getting warmed up. Literally. Because after the explosions comes the fallout, both radioactive and existential. And let me tell you, it's one hell of an after-party. Now let's zoom in, shall we? Let's take a walk through ground zero. But don't worry, it's all imaginary. You're not really melting. Probably. Imagine it's a normal Tuesday morning. Birds are chirping. Toast is popping. Someone somewhere is yelling at their coffee machine because oat milk still isn't barista foamable. Then, without warning, every single nuclear warhead on Earth arms itself. There's no diplomatic lead-up, no press conference, not even a cryptic social media post with a black square and a mysterious hashtag. Just ignition. And then the world becomes a strobe-lit, hell's cape of fire and thunder. Cities vanish. One moment you're checking your emails, the next you're pure energy. Even people hundreds of miles away from the blast zones suffer intense burns. Shockwaves travel faster than disbelief. Hospitals, those still standing, are overwhelmed in seconds. Water systems burst into steam. The internet, it flatlines, just when we finally needed a decent cat meme. Now let's look at New York. Poor New York. It's always in the movies, and today's no exception. A 1 megaton blast over Manhattan turns the city into a crater of molten glass. The Statue of Liberty gets turned into modern art, and Broadway's final curtain drops so hard it breaks through the Earth's crust. The radiation blast reaches New Jersey. Some might argue that's not entirely a loss, but let's not get petty in the apocalypse. Across the pond, London glows like a Christmas pudding soaked in plutonium. Paris, Tokyo, Mumbai, Cairo, Sao Paulo, they all light up like it's the 4th of July on every continent. The thing about nukes is they don't discriminate. Democracy, dictatorship, tax haven, they all burn the same. But here's where things really spiral. Because the bombs aren't just targeting cities. Strategic launch sites, military command centers, and even mobile systems detonate. Submarines parked in deep sea quietly cooking fish into radioactive sashimi. Satellites fall from orbit. The International Space Station, blinded by the light show, cut off from contact, drifting silently as the planet below turns into a giant microwave dinner gone very, very wrong. You might think, surely, someone somewhere would survive. And yes, some would. The real horror begins after the fireworks. The atmosphere is now clogged with megatons of soot and dust. This isn't regular dust, the kind that makes you sneeze and feel vaguely ashamed. This is ultra-fine, hyper-radioactive, sun-blocking doom dust. It floats high into the stratosphere, where no amount of rain can wash it away. Within days, sunlight dims globally. Not in a poetic, the sky looks different way, but in a why is it noon and my solar panels are crying way. Photosynthesis slows. Crops fail. Temperatures drop. The global thermometer plummets like a cryptocurrency scandal. In tropical zones, plants shrivel. In temperate zones, snow falls in June. In polar zones, things just get smugly colder. You'd think this would finally kill off mosquitoes, but no, they survive. Of course they do. Meanwhile, food chains collapse. The oceans go quiet. Without sunlight, plankton dies, and with it, everything that ever relied on it. That includes fish, whales, seagulls, and your next sushi roll. Human survivors start hoarding anything edible. Beans become currency. Rats become livestock. Old Twinkies become gourmet cuisine, rebranded as post-atomic pate. And in bunkers, oh, the bunkers, things aren't much better. Yes, there's shelter. There's canned soup. There's even a VHS copy of Dirty Dancing someone inexplicably packed for morale. But the isolation gnaws. The air gets stale. Arguments begin over whether radiation roulette should be played before or after dinner. Civilized norms unravel. Someone inevitably declares themselves supreme commander of the left corner. Someone else refuses to give up the last peanut butter jar. It gets messy. Outside, surface radiation levels soar. Venturing out means glowing in the dark, literally. Survivors develop fashion trends based on anti-radiation suits and repurposed duct tape. Geiger counters become the new social media. Constant clicking equals trending. And everywhere, the question echoes. How did we let it get this bad? Well, the real kicker is, no one really let it happen. There wasn't a plan. There wasn't a war. Just a cascade of detonation, as if the planet had decided, collectively, to commit the grandest cosmic oops in history. Maybe it was sabotage. Maybe it was AI. Maybe a bored intern spilled coffee on a launch panel. The truth doesn't matter. What matters is that now humanity exists in a scorched, frozen, radioactive version of Earth, trying to survive with fewer tools than a middle school science fair. But remember, this is only the beginning. We've yet to talk about the politics of post-nuke kingdoms, the rise of cults that worship expired canned goods, and the unexpected comeback of cassette tapes. So don't go anywhere. Not that you can, there's nowhere left to go. As the smoke and static clear, if that's even possible, we arrive in the messy aftermath. Civilization, as we knew it, has done a swan dive off a radioactive cliff, and what's left is a mix between medieval desperation and sci-fi horror. Governments have collapsed, or rather, evaporated. Borders? Obsolete. What's the point of customs and passports when your capital city is now a molten sinkhole? In the ruins of what used to be Europe, new factions emerge. Some declare themselves the Ash Kings, draped in tattered flags and wielding scavenged smartphones as relics of a lost world. Their currency? Batteries. Their laws? Whatever the guy with the biggest lead pipe says. In North America, survivors dig through suburban basements looking for canned goods and arguing about whose conspiracy theory was right. One particularly deranged group sets up a society built entirely around reruns of 1980s sitcoms. They believe the sacred teachings of Alf and Cheers hold the key to rebirth. Then there are the bunkers, those who went in before the boom. Ultra-rich doomsday preppers, former politicians, and Silicon Valley gurus. You know, the people who once sold apps that told you what mood your dog was in. Now they're leading micro-civilizations underground, still giving TED Talks, but this time to 12 emaciated engineers and one very confused chicken. The irony? Most of them didn't plan for long-term air filtration. Turns out, money can buy you luxury survival chambers, but not common sense. Who needs another wine cellar when you're choking on your own CO2? Meanwhile, the Earth itself begins to rebel in slow, majestic vengeance. Earthquakes ripple from blast zones. Volcanic activity increases due to the sudden tectonic trauma. Entire continents shift slightly, like a tired person adjusting their posture after a catastrophic cramp. Tsunamis lash coastlines, carrying away the last beachfront yoga studios and tiki bars. Deserts expand. Rainforests burn. The climate throws a tantrum of biblical proportions, as if yelling, "You nuked me? Fine. Let's see how you enjoy permafrost in Miami." And then there's the nuclear winter, now in full swing. Global temperatures plummet by as much as 15 degrees Celsius. That might not sound like much, until your crops die, your pipes freeze, and polar bears start showing up in places like Texas. For those still scraping a life together above ground, every day becomes a fight against starvation, hypothermia, and mutant raccoons who now rule the alleyways with terrifying efficiency. Speaking of mutations, let's talk radiation. You see, when hundreds of nukes go off, they don't just kill, they linger. Radiation seeps into everything: soil, water, even your treasured high school yearbook, which now glows faintly at night. The survivors are not untouched. Over time, some begin to change. Hair loss, yes. Skin conditions, absolutely. But also other things. Extra fingers, heightened senses. In rare cases, the ability to digest mayonnaise without gagging. Humanity starts to splinter. On one end, the still human, clinging to remnants of old-world morality and expired hand sanitizer. On the other, the mutated, embracing their new identities and forming tribes with names like the Glowborn or Team Irradiation Nation. The philosophical debates get louder. What does it mean to be human? Is it DNA? Is it memory? Or is it the ability to remember how pizza tasted before the crust turned to ash? Some survivors embrace spiritualism. They say the nuclear fire was a divine reset, and the few left behind are chosen to build Eden 2.0. Others say God left the building long ago, and what's left is just a cosmic prank gone horribly right. As months pass, the sky remains a sullen shade of gray. Sunlight is an old rumor. Hope becomes a luxury. And still, deep underground, a few scientists try to reverse the damage. Clinging to scraps of data, ancient satellite images, and dusty lab equipment, they theorize ways to decontaminate the soil, restart agriculture, and maybe even rebuild some form of internet. Because apparently humanity cannot cope without streaming shows about baking and serial killers. But no matter what they do, one truth looms: the world will never be the same. History, if it survives, will record this event not as a war, not as an accident, but as the moment when humanity pressed the reset button with its fist and broke the machine. And the animals? Oh, they're having a field day. With humans mostly gone, deer wander through abandoned suburbs. Bears lounge in emptied hot tubs. Pigeons, somehow immune to all logic, continue pooping on statues no one's there to clean. And somewhere, a lone cockroach writes a memoir titled "I Told You So." We've only scratched the surface. The sociological unraveling, the rise of post-nuclear ideologies, the comedy of error that is rebuilding a society without Google. We're going to get into all of that. But for now, let's take a breath. Not too deep, though. That air's still a bit crispy. If you thought civilization fell apart with a dramatic kaboom, wait until you see what happens after the noise fades and the silence kicks in. In the eerie calm that follows, humans, those brilliant, stubborn, highly flammable apes, begin to rebuild. Or at least, try to. Let's start with what remains of communication. Satellites? Fried. Cables? Melted. Your smartphone? Now a glorified paperweight with radiation-enhanced signal bars that connect to absolutely nothing. Humanity is forced to rediscover something called talking, face-to-face, in real time, without emojis. It's horrifying and slow. The first post-apocalyptic arguments are about how to make coffee using acorns and whether the concept of brunch is worth reviving. Without mass media, myths begin to form. Did Australia sink beneath the waves? Did Canada survive by sheer politeness and snow insulation? Is Elon Musk still alive and trying to launch a bunker to Mars? No one knows. Rumors swirl faster than fallout. One story tells of a cult in the Alps that worships an old vending machine that still works, offering stale chips and enlightenment in equal measure. Another insists that a group of children in Scandinavia have formed a government entirely based on interpretive dance. The scary part? They're more efficient than most democratic systems. Meanwhile, power, true, terrifying power, now belongs to those who control resources. Not gold, not stocks, but water. Potable, clean, non-glowing water. Forget nuclear warheads. The person who owns a working Brita filter is now a deity. A single bottle of mineral water becomes a symbol of both hope and probable betrayal. Wars break out over ancient aquifers. A man in what used to be Nebraska builds a throne from bottled Evian. He calls himself the Hydrator. He never blinks. Food, too, takes a dark turn. With the ecosystem a smoldering mess, most crops refuse to grow. What's left is either irradiated, mutated, or both. You know you've hit rock bottom when a three-eyed carrot is your main course. People begin to trade recipes for cockroach stew, boiled moss, and mystery meat surprise, which usually turns out to be surprise. You're still hungry. But humans, being incurably optimistic, try to bring back culture. Art rises from the ashes, literally. In bombed-out cities, people paint murals using soot and crushed berries. Songs are composed using salvaged instruments and occasional screams of agony as percussion. One artist becomes famous for creating sculptures out of melted toaster ovens. He titles them Hope in Aisle 4. Then there are the thinkers, the philosophers of doom. They gather around campfires, wearing mismatched hazmat suits and arguing about whether the apocalypse was a punishment or simply a cosmic shrug. They ponder if humanity deserved this, or if intelligence is just an evolutionary accident, like wisdom teeth or the popularity of reality TV. One group insists we were always heading toward destruction. Another insists this is just Act 2 of a 3-part cosmic sitcom. The laugh track, distant thunder, and sobbing raccoons. Let's not forget animals. Freed from zoos, sanctuaries, and the crushing burden of human supervision, they begin to adapt. Wolves take over abandoned shopping malls. Crows form intricate surveillance networks. A gang of mutated squirrels starts stealing shiny objects and constructing statues of nuts and forgotten gods. Somewhere, a lone chimpanzee stumbles upon an abandoned power plant and begins a religion. Step aside, human theology. Economies, as we knew them, collapse. But something else takes shape. A bartering system based on utility, novelty, and sheer absurdity. Want antibiotics? Trade a solar-powered flashlight and a full set of teeth. Need a bike tire? That'll cost you 3 cans of creamed corn and 1 functioning harmonica. The post-nuclear world runs not on logic, but on vibes. Strong, desperate, slightly unhinged vibes. The environment continues its meltdown. Acid rain is the new normal. Snow is no longer white. It's orange, or sometimes pink, depending on how much plutonium happened to leak into the clouds that day. Forests become radioactive jungles where trees grow too fast, and deer glow faintly under moonlight. One region is nicknamed the Neon Woods, where nothing dies, but everything mutates. And still, amid all this chaos, love survives. Ridiculous, irrational, stubborn love. Two people meet beside a crater that used to be a Starbucks. They bond over shared trauma and an unopened bag of pretzels. They fall in love, get married under a melted billboard, and raise a child named Falautina. She learns to walk, speak, and barter before the age of 2. Her first word? Duck, as in duck and cover. Heartwarming. Science, too, refuses to die. In underground labs powered by pedal bikes and spite, scientists try to develop decontamination methods. Some attempt to clone radiation-resistant crops. Others try to breed cows that taste like bacon. Progress is slow. One team accidentally creates sentient yogurt. It now leads its own micronation and demands constitutional rights. Amid this absurdity, a new global language begins to emerge. It's a mix of emojis, old memes, and grunts. A smiley face drawn on a wall might mean safe zone, or do not eat the squirrels here. Context is everything. Sociolinguists of the future will have a field day, assuming they survive long enough to have a field. And finally, somewhere on what used to be the International Space Station, 2 surviving astronauts float silently. They've watched the world burn from above, powerless to stop it. They communicate through shortwave radio, sending jokes, poems, and desperate pleas to anyone listening. They call themselves the last broadcasters. The signal is weak. The message is strong. We're still here. Are you? Up next, we're going to explore what happens when underground societies clash, when mutated ideologies rise, and when humanity faces its most twisted question yet. Should we rebuild, or just enjoy the silence? Imagine a world where sunlight never really feels clean again. Not because it's dimmer, but because every time it hits your skin, you wonder, was this light filtered through a cloud of vaporized cities? That's life in year 3 after the boom. By now, the global population has shrunk to about 5% of its former glory, mostly thanks to radiation, famine, panic-induced civil wars, and an unusually aggressive gang of cannibal yoga instructors operating out of the ruins of Los Angeles. But let's talk about the real power shift: underground civilizations. Not metaphorically underground. Literally. Beneath the crust of what used to be Moscow, a network of ex-bureaucrats, scientists, and one suspiciously well-fed hamster have established the Ministry of Continuity, a bunker society where the national anthem is a Cold War ringtone and everyone's job title includes the word deputy. Their goal? Preserve order. Their method? Excel spreadsheets and mandatory bedtime. It's the world's first dictatorship run entirely on Microsoft Office. Across the Atlantic, deep below Switzerland, a competing bunker called Sanctum Omega emerges. It's run by billionaires, influencers, and one guy who insists he used to be the backup drummer for Coldplay. Their society runs on likes, curated food rations, and oxygen-rich VIP zones. Decision-making is based on weekly polls. One week, they voted to ban the word apocalypse because it was too much of a downer. Another week, they replaced their national flag with a minimalist logo that simply reads, "We're fine." These bunkers are not alone. In what used to be Tokyo, an underground collective known as the Order of the Unplugged rises. Their philosophy? Reject all pre-nuclear technology. No lights, no tools, no sarcasm. They live by candlelight and communicate only through interpretive humming. Outsiders call them the hum people. They're feared and revered, mostly because their vibe is so mysterious you assume they know something you don't. With the surface still mostly uninhabitable, thanks to the radioactive superstorms that occasionally rearrange what's left of the continents, humanity splits into factions, each with its own ideology, myths, and fashion sense. The Dusters, for instance, wear modified trench coats and worship wind as a divine purifier. Their chief belief: the more ash in your lungs, the purer your soul. They're also incredibly good at poetry slams. Meanwhile, in the remains of the Sahara, a group called the Bright Ones thrives. They believe the nuclear detonation was divine cleansing. Their prophet is a former DJ who now claims he can read cosmic vibrations through melted vinyl records. He leads sunrise rituals involving interpretive dances atop sand dunes while reciting what he calls the Holy Playlist. Track 1, Radioactive by Imagine Dragons. Naturally, but it's not all glowing wastelands and bunker cults. Some communities manage to recreate fragments of the old world, like schools. In one remote valley, survivors establish a poker academy, a school for post-doomsday children. Subjects include forging 101, DIY hazmat suits, and an advanced ethics seminar titled To Eat or Not to Eat Uncle Gary. The curriculum is tough, but it produces resilient thinkers, many of whom grow up to be warlords with surprisingly good grammar. Economies evolve too. A new form of currency emerges: glowstones. Small, mildly radioactive pebbles that light up in the dark. They're used to buy everything from antibiotics to storytelling time. Of course, long-term exposure to them causes rashes, hair loss, and in rare cases, spontaneous interpretive dance. But hey, they're shiny, and humans have never been able to resist shiny things. In some places, technology begins to resurface. A ragtag group of engineers in what used to be Bangalore builds a functioning computer from scavenged calculators and toaster parts. They name it Be Patron, and it becomes the oracle for a community of 300 survivors. People line up to ask it questions. Most answers are just random numbers or ASCII smiley faces, but once, it predicted a dust storm 6 hours early. Be Patron is now high priest of logic. And yet, even in this patchwork quilt of madness, people yearn for something familiar. Holidays are reinvented. Nuclear Valentine's Day involves exchanging canned food and heartfelt Geiger counter readings. Christmas becomes Glowmas, where kids receive socks, batteries, and, if they've been good, unspoiled peanut butter. The top carol of the season? All I want for Glowmas is clean air. Then there's justice, or what passes for it. With no functioning courts, legal disputes are settled through ancient rituals like rock, paper, scissors, or competitive haiku. One notable case involved two rival clans fighting over an untouched vending machine. The matter was resolved when a third group, the Night Raiders, simply stole the vending machine and vanished into the wasteland. Court adjourned. But here's the twist. Despite everything, something akin to hope begins to take root. Not optimism, mind you. That's extinct. But hope, stubborn and cynical, lives on. In one shattered city, someone paints a mural that simply reads, "We're not done yet." Another survivor records folk songs on salvaged cassette tapes. One of the most popular, "Ashes, Ashes, We All Blew Up." Catchy tune, terrible dancing. And somewhere in a jungle that used to be Thailand, a plant species begins to glow gently in the dark. Not from radiation, but from adaptation. Nature, ever the quiet show-off, begins its slow reclaiming of the planet. Trees grow through buildings. Birds nest in missile silos. Foxes curl up on the seats of rusted-out Ferraris. The world, though wounded, continues. In the next part, we'll explore the unlikely rise of post-nuclear philosophy, the emergence of new religions that involve jellyfish, and what it really means to rebuild a society when everyone's DNA is humming like a microwave. Stick around, because things are about to get glowier and much weirder. You'd think that after every nuclear warhead on Earth goes kaboom, humanity would settle down. Maybe take a collective deep breath, assuming their lungs still worked, and reconsider some of its more self-destructive impulses. But no, what actually happens is a philosophical renaissance. Not the kind with wine and togas. No, this one smells like iodine and canned beans and happens mostly in abandoned malls converted into think tanks by people wearing duct-taped boots and wielding academic degrees like scavenged weapons. At the core of this new intellectual surge is a central question. Why? Why did it happen? Why did we build thousands of city-killing devices in the first place? Why did we store them like collectible Pokemon cards no one was supposed to use? Why did we, in the final act of geopolitical chicken, decide to smash the launch buttons with both fists? And the answer, depending on whom you ask, ranges from because humans are dumb to because the AI told us it was statistically efficient, which is not comforting. But let's talk about the new religions. Because when society explodes, so does the need for meaning. In the ruins of Paris, the Church of the Detonated Redeemer gathers weekly in a crater that used to be the Eiffel Tower. Their holy relic is a melted espresso machine. Their chants are whispered lines from apocalyptic sci-fi movies. Their motto? We were warned. Their deity is known only as the Bright Flash, and no one is sure if it's a metaphor or just Stockholm Syndrome with gamma rays. Elsewhere, in the Midwest of what used to be the United States, a cult called the Sacred Fallout believes the radiation is a divine filter. Only the chosen will survive the glow. Their initiation involves walking through a cloud of dust with a tuna can on your head while humming Britney Spears songs backward. It's deeply weird, but it has great branding. Meanwhile, some survivors form a more secular belief system called rebootism. They believe this whole catastrophe was nature's control plus alt plus delete. To them, humanity has been given a second chance, tabula rasa. Their sacred text is a tattered copy of Windows for Dummies, which they interpret as prophecy. Their commandments include, "Thou shalt not hoard toilet paper, and thou shalt always back up thy soul, preferably to an external hard drive." And then, there's the jellyfish. No, seriously. In the flooded remnants of Venice, where the canals now glow faintly at night, a mutated species of bioluminescent jellyfish appears. Locals begin to follow them, believing the creatures are messengers from Gaia, here to guide the worthy into the next phase of evolution. This new sect is called the Drift. They speak only in whispers and wear translucent robes made from recycled plastic bags. Their high priest is a woman known only as She Who Stings Lightly. But even as humans find meaning in the madness, nature keeps adapting. Mutated pigeons in Chicago grow an extra toe. Squirrels develop night vision. Crocodiles start mimicking human laughter to lure prey, a development that is both terrifying and, let's be honest, kind of clever. Humanity now exists in a delicate dance with the post-nuclear food chain. Not above it, not below it, just in it. Sometimes eaten, sometimes entertained. Social structures evolve. In the new mega-village of Hope Sink, a barter system becomes formalized. The highest valued items? Clean water, antibiotics, and stories. Yes, stories. People trade legends like currency. A well-told tale of survival can earn you a week's worth of dried meat. A good joke might get you a blanket. A lie well told, that's practically gold. Welcome to the economy of fiction. And in that fragile web of storytelling, heroes begin to rise. Not the kind with capes. The kind who knows how to fix a generator using shoelaces, a toothbrush, and strong profanity. The kind who can navigate radiation storms with nothing but a compass and spite. They don't seek glory. They seek functional plumbing. But to their communities, they are giants. Yet the greatest shift of all might be psychological. In a world that once worshipped convenience, efficiency, and bottom lines, people begin to rediscover patience. When nothing works instantly, when survival is a daily improvisation, when the next sunrise isn't guaranteed, patience becomes a survival trait. Alongside it grows humor, a black, sharp, absurd kind of humor. The kind that says, we blew it all up, and somehow, we're still here. Now past the canned corn. In one surreal twist of post-nuclear fate, a radio signal begins broadcasting across the remains of North America. No one knows its source. It plays a looping message in several languages. You are not alone. Someone is always listening. Please do not eat the batteries. Conspiracy theories bloom. Some think it's aliens. Others think it's a rogue AI trying to make contact. One man insists it's his ex-wife. He's written a book about it. No one has read it. And while most communication systems are dead, survivors begin to rebuild networks using pre-digital tech. Morse code is back in style. Semaphore returns as an art form. One village uses trained parrots to carry messages. Another uses shadow puppets and megaphones. The human drive to communicate, it turns out, is even stronger than the human drive to detonate. All of this leads to one unspoken realization. For all its noise, devastation, and absurdity, life goes on. Not in spite of the nukes, but in defiance of them. Not because we deserve it, but because that's what we do. We stumble forward, laugh at the rubble, hug the radioactive goat, and try again. Next, we'll venture into what the new political systems look like, how elections are conducted in bunker societies, and why the phrase "trust me, I have a mushroom farm" is now a valid campaign slogan. Stay with us. The fallout is far from over. Democracy, it turns out, is surprisingly resilient. Even when everyone's eyebrows have been singed off and ballots are printed on repurposed toilet paper. In the shattered world that follows the simultaneous detonation of all nuclear weapons, people still feel a deep and irrational need to vote for something. Anything. A leader, a mascot, a mushroom overlord. Give them a box, a stick, and a wall to slap a slogan on, and boom, politics is back, baby. But forget presidents and prime ministers. In the post-blast era, titles get weird. In the free canton of Shellshock, the highest official is the Supreme Water Allocation Warden. In Bunker Block 17B, leadership is decided by an ancient rite known as the Great Debate and Pie Fight. Whoever wins the argument while avoiding facial pastry wins the seat of power. In the flooded remnants of Sydney, a council of genetically modified seagulls has reportedly claimed dominion over the ruins of the Opera House. No one has dared challenge them. Elections in this new world are less about policies and more about vibes. One candidate wins by promising to bring back disco. Another wins simply by having both ears intact and teeth that haven't fallen out yet. There's a village in what used to be northern Canada where the mayor is a moose. Not symbolic, a literal moose. His campaign slogan was Moo Se for stability. And to be fair, he hasn't started any wars. Which, by old world standards, makes him a pretty solid statesman. The rise of new political ideologies is another delightful mess. There's thermal communalism, where everyone shares everything because, well, everything's irradiated anyway. Then there's atomarchy, which believes leadership should be rotated weekly by drawing names from a Geiger counter. Some adhere to glotocracy, where only those who visibly fluoresce under blacklight are deemed worthy of making laws. Scientists argue this is biologically reckless. Glotocrats say, you're just jealous of the shine. As absurd as this all sounds, there's an undercurrent of desperate hope in these systems. They represent humanity's stubbornness, its refusal to completely surrender to chaos. Even amid ash and fallout, people line up, cast ballots, cheer when their mushroom farming neighbor gets elected because he promises to install a second community bucket. A sense of ritual, however ridiculous, gives life texture, purpose, a distraction from the occasional spontaneous combustion of nearby squirrels. Meanwhile, diplomacy between settlements emerges in equally surreal forms. One group sends a team of accordion players as peace envoys. Another builds a life-sized replica of the Eiffel Tower from ramen packets as a gesture of goodwill. There is a brief war over a shipment of chocolate pudding, but it ends after both sides realize the pudding is expired by a decade and mostly made of powdered regret. Bartering for influence becomes commonplace. In Bunkeropolis, influence is measured in pre-blast snack packets, especially Doritos, which now serve as both currency and weapon due to their terrifying crunch volume. One charismatic leader gains a cult following by claiming to have discovered a bunker where Nicolas Cage films are stored on VHS. He swears watching Face slash off backwards grants enlightenment. Surprisingly, attendance at his screenings keeps growing. And in all of this, stories continue to matter more than anything. Leaders rise not because they promise rations, but because they tell stories that make people laugh, cry, or briefly forget that their shoes melted last week. The narrative is king. One tribe elects a former librarian because her bedtime tales are the only known cure for bunker-born insomnia. Another follows a man who can recite the entire plot of The Lord of the Rings from memory, including the extended editions. Yet not all politics are lighthearted. Power struggles do erupt. Some communities revert to authoritarian rule under warlords with names like Dr. Boom and Comrade Fizzle. These microdictators enforce order through loudspeakers, threatening exile to the outer dust, a poetic term for that really bad patch of radiated sand with no Wi-Fi. But even under tyranny, satire survives. Graffiti flourishes. The phrase, "nuke me once, shame on you," appears painted across a scorched tank. Stickers that read, "make Earth unmelty again," become ironic collectibles. As humans dig bunkers deeper, grow hydroponic radishes in makeshift bathtubs, and use cassette tapes as fencing materials, they also cling to something ancient, the need to believe in something beyond survival. Whether it's a laugh, a vote, or the idea that tomorrow might involve fewer mutant raccoons trying to steal your pants, belief keeps the nuclear winter just a little warmer. Next up, we'll explore the fate of culture, music, fashion, art, and why TikTok somehow survived while everything else exploded. Because if one thing endures after all else falls, it's our love of ridiculous trends and even more ridiculous dances. So, civilization may have crumbled, cities may have been reduced to piles of polite, glowing gravel, and global institutions may now be headquartered in vending machines. But somehow, culture didn't just survive. It mutated. Like everything else in this brave new, irradiated world, it adapted to the apocalypse with a flair for drama, irony, and disco lights powered by hamster treadmills. Let's start with music. When every known streaming service evaporates in a digital mushroom cloud and USB cables become rarer than breathable air, humanity falls back on ancient technology, cassette tapes, vinyl records, and human memory. Yes, in a bunker in what used to be Arizona, a man named Randy becomes the most famous DJ in the hemisphere. Not because he has the best mixes, but because he's memorized every lyric of Britney Spears' entire discography and performs them acoustically with a modified ukulele made from plumbing parts. He is revered. He is feared. He is the high priest of pop. Of course, new musical genres explode into existence. There's wasteland wobble, a rhythm that combines Geiger counter clicks with the sound of mutated crickets. Fallout funk is big in the Midwest craters, particularly among nomadic tribes that wear biohazard suits painted with glitter. And doom hop becomes the angsty voice of a generation that grew up eating canned beans by candlelight and thinks a mosh pit is a great way to test for radiation burns. Fashion, naturally, keeps pace. With malls reduced to skeletal frameworks inhabited by mildly aggressive crows, people get creative. Outfits are crafted from seatbelt webbing, microwave doors, and occasionally flattened squirrels. Don't ask. A new aesthetic emerges, APOC chic. Think Mad Max meets Burning Man meets My Laundry Exploded. One woman in the former Netherlands wears a dress entirely made of keyboard keys, clacking poetically as she walks. Her wedding dress? A combination of fishnet, fax paper, and optimism. Beauty standards change dramatically. In the post-blast era, the hottest look is mildly glowing but not too glowy. A tan is no longer desirable unless it comes from solar reflection off a puddle of molten aluminum. Scarcity breeds ingenuity. Lipstick is made from crushed berries and crayon bits. Eyeliner, burnt plastic, carefully applied with a toothpick. Hair gel is replaced by ash fix. Just dab a little nuclear ash behind the ears, and suddenly you're the hottest charred humanoid in the bunker disco. But it's not just art and fashion that bloom in this charred garden of humanity. Literature makes a comeback. With the internet gone and ebooks fried into oblivion, old-school paper books become sacred relics. Libraries are guarded like fortresses. Bunker 9, deep under what used to be Prague, preserves a single, slightly soggy copy of Pride and Prejudice, which is read aloud every Thursday to great applause. The phrase, "I dare say, Mr. Darcy," becomes a common pickup line in fallout shelters. New authors arise as well. Post-blast fiction is raw, gritty, and often contains characters with 4 eyes and existential dread. Genres like nuclear noir, mutant romance, and thermonuclear haiku dominate. A best-selling work titled My Life as a Glowing Orphan tells the tale of a child raised by sentient pine cones. Critics call it devastatingly plausible. Theater, too, finds its way back. In shattered amphitheaters and bunkers with good acoustics, people perform dramatic retellings of The Matrix and Titanic with whatever props they can find. One troupe in Iceland performs Hamlet with sock puppets and a plastic sword labeled, "Not real weapon, please don't confiscate." Audiences weep, not for the tragedy, but because the moldy popcorn is making a comeback. And TikTok? Yes. Somehow, somewhere, in a mysterious pocket of technological survival, a single server in a hardened underground data center keeps running. And on it, the last remnants of humanity's most precious art form. 15-second videos of people dancing in gas masks. The Rad Dance Challenge becomes the viral sensation of the wasteland. People across continents upload clips of themselves twirling in front of irradiated lakes, timing their choreography with the eerie pulses of distant, unexploded nukes. The top-liked video features a cat wearing sunglasses lip-syncing to Bohemian Rhapsody, shot entirely in a crumbling bathroom. Through all this, one thing becomes clear. Even when the world burns, especially when the world burns, humans need to create, to laugh, to make something out of nothing, then glue glitter on it and call it a movement. Because art, in all its ridiculous, flamboyant, unnecessary glory, is what reminds us we're more than just ash-covered survivors fighting over the last packet of ketchup. Coming up next, how surviving humans rebuild religion, spirituality, and belief systems. Because let's be honest, after all nukes go boom, some of us are going to need answers. Or at least better excuses. After watching every known god, demigod, and moderately useful life coach ignore humanity's most fiery tantrum to date, the simultaneous detonation of every nuclear weapon in existence, survivors understandably began asking questions. Big questions. Cosmic questions. Questions like, why us? And who do I talk to about this glowing rash? And is karma allergic to irony? With most organized religions vaporized along with their headquarters and clergy, a theological vacuum opened up faster than you can say holy smokes. Into that vacuum rushed every flavor of belief humanity had ever flirted with, plus several freshly invented by bunker dwellers who had read The Secret backwards while high on expired protein powder. One of the first post-apocalyptic belief systems to emerge was the Church of the Holy Fallout, whose central doctrine was that the nuclear fire was not destruction, but divine purification. They wore robes made of tinfoil and believed microwave radiation could realign chakras. Their version of baptism involved being lightly toasted under a heat lamp while reciting the sacred chant, "We glow because we know." Meanwhile, across what was formerly Scandinavia, a new sect called the Order of the Mushroom Cloud treated nukes as misunderstood celestial messengers. They prayed not in temples, but in decommissioned missile silos, where the acoustics were perfect for Gregorian chants and occasional techno raves. Their creation myth involved an atom getting its feelings heard and deciding to self-destruct dramatically, setting off a chain reaction of self-pity that birthed the universe. In the ruins of old Las Vegas, a different brand of faith arose, the cult of chance. Here, survivors worshipped dice, roulette wheels, and anything with odds worse than 50-50. They believed the apocalypse was just God pulling the ultimate slot machine, and hitting 777s meant everyone got obliterated. Services involved flipping coins to make all decisions, from dinner options to high priest appointments. Unsurprisingly, they didn't last long. Then there were the UFO revivalists, emboldened by the idea that surely aliens would intervene now that humanity had proven just how badly it could mess things up. Whole communities sprang up wearing aluminum hats shaped like swans, scanning the skies for rescue beams. One particularly optimistic group in former New Mexico even built a runway from salvaged glow-in-the-dark skateboards, convinced the Galactic Federation was merely stuck in traffic. But not all beliefs leaned into the absurd. Some survivors turned introspective. They began worshiping the concept of survival itself, elevating those who could purify water, grow potatoes in radioactive soil, or win a knife fight over a can of beans to near saintly status. Instead of saints, they had functionals. Instead of miracles, they had working flashlights. Interestingly, atheists didn't get much rest either. Many found themselves quietly reconsidering their stance after witnessing an elderly woman walk barefoot across molten concrete, carrying a full shopping bag, and muttering, "Told you it wasn't the end." She became known only as Mildred the Unburned. Her followers built shrines out of shopping carts and expired coupons. New holidays emerged. Detonation Day was marked by dramatic readings of last emails sent before the blast. The Festival of the Fallout Moon celebrated the night the radioactive sky briefly turned neon green and everyone had existential hallucinations involving cartoon penguins. Children looked forward to Radmoss, when elders hid sealed candy bars in the rubble and whoever found one wasn't mutated the following week. Probably. Theological debates still raged, of course. Was the Great Flash an act of divine wrath, cosmic sarcasm, or just extremely poor planning? One bunker-based think tank, calling themselves the Enlightened Toast, concluded that existence was a simulation running on a dying laptop buried in the cosmic couch cushions of an apathetic deity named Doug. All in all, belief became what it always had been, an elaborate coping mechanism for chaos, dressed in robes or riddles or really shiny foil. And if the gods weren't answering, well, people just made up new ones. Some worshipped the last functioning vending machine. Some believed dogs were emissaries of heaven, based solely on how good they were at finding buried spam. And others found faith in laughter, in absurdity, in the simple daily act of not combusting spontaneously. Because when the world ends, and you're still breathing, even if your eyebrows are permanently singed, it's natural to search for meaning. To light candles, draw symbols, hum chants, and pray that somewhere out there, something bigger than all this mess still cares. Or at the very least, is taking notes for a sequel. Coming up next, we ask the ultimate question. After all the dust settles, after the last can beans are split, and the last conspiracy theories are shouted into the void, what kind of society rises from the ashes? And more importantly, will it have decent coffee? In the beginning, there was fire. And after the fire, silence. Then came the screams, followed by a long era of coughing, grumbling, and learning to make soup out of irradiated mushrooms. Yet somehow, impossibly, laughably, humanity survived. Not all of it, of course, just the stubborn bits. The ones too ornery to die properly, too sarcastic to take extinction seriously. The ones who emerged from bunkers, sewer systems, and discarded vending machines to ask, okay, but now what? With governments obliterated and the concept of national borders as outdated as fax machines, the surviving humans found themselves in a wild west of governance. At first, they tried the classics. Democracy failed because ballots spontaneously combusted. Monarchies collapsed after people remembered how much they hated being bossed around by inbred weirdos. Anarchism worked for a week until someone stole all the toilet paper and tried to claim divine right over it. So they improvised. The Federation of Cafeteria Zones ruled by lunch lady committees. The United Tribes of Battery Hoarders. The Holy Republic of former gym teachers. Every group had its own strange rituals, legal codes, and currency, usually bottle caps, dried ramen, or functioning pens. Eventually, barter evolved into something resembling economy again. The most valuable skills were no longer coding or investment banking, but knowing how to grow kale without it glowing and identifying which mutant squirrels were safe to eat. Infrastructure was slowly rebuilt using scavenged microwaves and doors ripped from burnt Teslas. Education consisted of storytelling, singing, and teaching kids how to sprint through radioactive zones without growing an extra limb. And somewhere in the background, a new kind of culture took root, built on shared absurdity. Survivors told tales not of ancient kings or divine miracles, but of the great detonation, when every idiot with a button managed to press it at once. It was retold with reverence and mockery, tragedy and stand-up comedy. The oral histories were full of lines like, "Grandpa lost his eyebrows when Moscow and Kansas lit up the same night. He said it was the best light show he ever saw." Humanity, it turned out, was excellent at mythologizing its own failure. Meanwhile, science made a weird comeback. Not the kind with pristine labs and lab coats, but mad scientist energy, the sort involving duct tape, curiosity, and slightly glowing rats. These new innovators rediscovered things like solar panels, water purification, and the secret to making coffee from acorns and stubborn optimism. Soon enough, a kind of post-apocalyptic renaissance bloomed. Music returned first, because you don't need much to bang on a pot. Then came books, handwritten at first, then typed on salvaged laptops with screens half missing. Art exploded too, often literally, because paint had to be mixed with unstable dyes. But no one minded. They called it boompressionism. Philosophers re-emerged, as they always do in uncertain times. They argued whether the detonation was humanity's lowest point or its most honest. They debated if our obsession with destruction had finally cured us of it. Some suggested the nukes had to go off so civilization could restart with fewer spreadsheets. Others believed this was just a brief calm before we figured out how to accidentally weaponize soup. Still, people adapted. They fell in love again, even if dates involved checking each other for radiation burns. They built homes, raised kids, and told stories around bonfires made of old celebrity memoirs. They laughed often, because once you've seen the world explode and somehow not died, everything else feels a bit less serious. And over time, Earth healed. The sky lost its orange tint. The ground grew less crackly. New forests rose, not quite normal, but defiantly green. Animals returned, slightly weirder but still majestic in a lopsided way. Humanity, ever the chronic overachiever of catastrophe, did what it always does best, rebuilt itself with duct tape, sarcasm, and relentless hope. And so, dear listener, if you followed us this far through Fallout fields, mutant marsupials, theological meltdowns, and government by vending machine, you've earned this moment of reflection. What if all nuclear weapons went off at once? Well, we found out. It sucked. A lot. But even then, especially then, humans found ways to laugh, to love, to make up gods and toast each other with warm soda beneath the radioactive moon. This is What If Horizons, signing off from the end of the world, where every worst-case scenario is just another excuse for humanity to reinvent the punchline. If you enjoyed this journey through mayhem and mushroom clouds, leave a comment, hit like, and subscribe so you don't miss our next apocalyptic meditation. After all, if we're going to go out in a blaze of existential absurdity, we might as well go viral doing it.